You're at a party and someone asks, "Are you a dog person or a cat person?" And you answer instantly, like you've been asked your blood type. No hesitation, no second guessing. Meanwhile, some people pause, overthink it, maybe say both just to avoid the question entirely. Why do most of us have such a strong, immediate answer to what seems like a throwaway question? Turns out, that split-second response is revealing way more about your personality, your nervous system, and how you handle relationships than you ever realized. Here's what's actually happening. Most people think their preference for dogs or cats is just taste. They grew up with one. They like the vibe. End of story. But psychologists keep finding the same pattern over and over. Thousands of people tested across different studies, and the same results keep repeating. Dog people and cat people don't just choose different animals. They live in different psychological climates. And the moment you look closely, it becomes obvious why each side feels right in their bones. Let's start where all of this actually begins. Before the adoption forms, before the food bowls, before the first cuddle or the first scratch, it begins with attraction. Not romantic attraction, psychological attraction. The pull we feel toward things that match our internal rhythm. You don't just walk into a shelter, look at both species, and flip a coin. Your mind gravitates to the creature that feels like a reflection of your nervous system. The one whose pace feels like a home you already know how to live inside. People who choose dogs are usually drawn to clarity, directness, predictability. A creature that gives you the whole emotional download without making you guess. A dog tells you everything with its body. Excitement, worry, boredom, devotion. Nothing is hidden. Nothing is withheld. And for some people, that's the kind of connection that makes sense. People who choose cats are drawn to something else entirely. Not confusion, but depth. They're comfortable with the unspoken, the subtle, the kind of connection you earn, not the kind that launches itself into your arms. They don't mind stillness. They don't mind taking time to learn someone's internal map. This isn't random preference. It's psychological symmetry, and the research data backs it up, especially the big 5 personality traits. Dog lovers tend to score higher on extroversion, agreeableness, and conscientiousness, meaning they lean towards sociability, warmth, consistency, structure. They often enjoy being around people more than being alone. They manage tasks with more discipline. They respond to the world with a kind of straightforwardness that fits the emotional clarity of a dog. Multiple studies have found the same thing. Dog people consistently describe themselves as people-oriented, outgoing, and energized by social contact, which is why they're far more likely to refer to themselves as people persons. Cat lovers consistently score higher on neuroticism and openness, not in a negative way, in a sensitive way. Their inner world is more active. Their thoughts run deeper tunnels. They pick up on things most people miss. They tolerate nuance without needing to force everything into a simple pattern. They question rules. They drift toward creativity. A University of Texas study found cat people scored about 12% higher in neuroticism. They also showed higher self-awareness, stronger vigilance, and a tendency to analyze emotional details others overlook. But this doesn't mean every dog lover is loud and social, or that every cat lover hides from people in their thoughts. These are patterns that show up when you look at large groups, not rigid labels stamped on individuals. You can be a dog person who needs a lot of solitude, or a cat person who talks to everyone in the room. The point isn't to shove you into a box. What your choice usually reveals is where you feel slightly more at ease. The animal you're drawn to doesn't tell the whole story of who you are, but it does expose the kind of bond your nervous system trusts the most. Now, let's break this open even more, because each preference reveals something about the way you handle closeness, trust, boundaries, and connection, the things people rarely admit out loud. People who gravitate toward dogs tend to value emotional closeness that's steady and obvious. They take loyalty seriously. They don't play games with commitment, and they don't disappear on people they care about. They are steady, dependable. They are good team players. They forgive easier. They assume good intentions until proven otherwise. This also aligns with research showing dog owners score higher on dominance-related traits, not aggression, but assertiveness and the ability to take charge when needed. They're often seen as more persistent, more outspoken, and more willing to stand up in social situations. A dog fits that worldview perfectly. A dog never questions whether you deserve loyalty. A dog doesn't withhold affection to test your worthiness. You walk outside, they're right behind you. You sit on the couch, they lean into you without hesitation. Dog people relate to that simplicity, that clarity, that consistency. People who gravitate toward cats handle connection differently. They don't trust easily, not because they're cold, but because they've seen what happens when trust is given too fast. They're not afraid of intimacy, but they prefer intimacy that respects boundaries. They prefer relationships where choice matters, where affection is earned. They understand that connection doesn't have to be loud to be real. They rely on self-analysis more than external reassurance. This mirrors research showing cat people are more introverted, more self-contained, and far more likely to spend long periods in solitary or low-key environments. Studies even show they are more likely to hold advanced university degrees and perform higher on various intelligence tests, possibly because they spend more time in independent mental work. A cat fits that worldview perfectly. A cat doesn't pretend. A cat doesn't perform. A cat doesn't give affection because it's expected, only when it's honest. Here's where it gets deeper. Dog people often grew up valuing harmony. They learn to be dependable, sometimes to a fault. A dog reinforces that role. It gives them someone who needs them, someone who mirrors that loyalty back, someone who makes consistency feel rewarding instead of draining. And interestingly, dog owners are statistically more likely to live with partners, children, or larger households in general. Their lifestyle naturally leans toward shared responsibility. Cat people often grew up relying on themselves, maybe because others disappointed them. Maybe because they learned early that emotions aren't always handled well in other people's hands. Maybe because they were the observers in their environment, not the center. Cats give them something they rarely get from humans: connection without intrusion. A relationship where both can exist without collapsing into each other. A bond that doesn't demand constant explanation or constant emotional labor. Studies show cat owners are a third more likely to live alone, especially single women, which reinforces the pattern of valuing independence and emotional space. Cat lovers question systems. They drift toward ideas that don't fit inside the usual boxes. It's no surprise that cat preference correlates with greater likelihood of non-traditional beliefs. Cat people aren't afraid to stand outside the group mind. In fact, studies found cat people are more likely to vote for progressive candidates, hold unconventional beliefs, and identify as atheist or non-religious. Their psychological profile overlaps heavily with creative personalities. Dog lovers, meanwhile, often prefer clearer paths, not because they lack imagination, but because they carry a kind of internal steadiness most people don't have. There's a grounded intelligence in that, a way of seeing the world as something you participate in, not escape from. And, interestingly, dog people are much more tolerant of cats than cat people are of dogs. About 70% of dog lovers say they would welcome a cat into their home, while the majority of cat people say they would reject a puppy. This tolerance reflects the social openness found in dog lovers across studies. Now, here's the part most people never think about. Your preference doesn't just reveal your psychology, it shapes it. Dog people often become more structured because their dog pulls them into routine. Morning walks, feeding schedules, daily training. They begin living around stability even if they didn't before. The dog doesn't just mirror their personality, it reinforces it. This may be part of why dog owners tend to report better cardiovascular health and longer lifespans. The physical activity and structured routine create measurable physiological benefits. Cat people often become more introspective because their cat rewards subtlety. You learn to read tiny signals, the slow blink, the careful approach, the silent request for closeness. Living with a cat requires intuition, not instruction. It strengthens the part of you that notices what others miss. Owners of cats often show higher sensitivity to micro-expressions and emotional cues, according to several behavioral studies. Likely because cats communicate in more nuanced ways than dogs. Both animals train the human as much as the human trains them. And none of this makes one group better, it just makes them different. One group thrives through openness, the other thrives through observation. One group builds connection through presence, the other builds connection through depth. But if you really want to understand yourself, truly understand yourself, don't just look at the animal you chose. Look at the version of you that animal brings out. If you're a dog person, ask yourself, do you constantly manage other people's well-being because it feels like your job? Do you like knowing where you stand with someone instead of guessing? Do you prefer environments that are predictable because unpredictability exhausted you at some point in life? If you're a cat person, ask yourself, do you keep parts of yourself hidden because you learned not everyone is trustworthy with them? Do you trust slowly because your nervous system refuses to believe in shortcuts? Do you crave closeness, but only when it doesn't suffocate your individuality? Both paths come from experience. Both paths come from wiring you didn't choose. Both paths are real, valid, and deeply human. So the next time someone asks, are you a dog person or a cat person? Understand what they're really asking. How does your mind move? What kind of connection feels right to you? What does comfort look like inside your nervous system? Your answer isn't about the animal. It's about who you are when no one is watching. And that's not random. That's you.